Standing on the surface of Earth, you feel nothing of the tremendous speeds at which you're hurtling through space. There's no wind in your hair from our planet's rotation, no sense of acceleration as we orbit the Sun, no perception whatsoever of the solar system's journey around the galactic center. This stillness feels absolute, as though the ground beneath your feet represents a fixed point in the universe. Yet nothing could be further from the truth. Every atom in your body participates in a cosmic dance of staggering complexity and scale, spinning and wheeling through space at velocities that would seem impossible if we could somehow step outside our frame of reference and observe ourselves from a distant vantage point. The Earth rotates on its axis at roughly 1,000 miles per hour at the equator, completing a full revolution every 24 hours. We orbit the Sun at about 67,000 miles per hour, tracing an elliptical path through space that brings us back to approximately the same position each year. The Sun itself, carrying its entire family of planets, asteroids, and comets, revolves around the center of the Milky Way galaxy at an estimated 500,000 miles per hour, taking roughly 230 million years to complete a single galactic orbit. Meanwhile, our galaxy moves through space relative to other galaxies, and the local group of galaxies to which we belong participates in even larger cosmic flows and currents. At every scale, from the smallest particles to the largest structures in the universe, rotation and motion define existence itself. This disconnect between cosmic reality and human perception reveals something profound about the nature of motion and our place in the universe. We evolved to perceive threats and opportunities at human scales, to track the flight of a thrown stone or the approach of a predator. Our senses develop no capacity to detect the vast motions that carry us through space because those motions occur smoothly, without the jerks and jolts that might threaten our survival. The principle at work here is one that Galileo first clearly articulated, and Einstein later refined into a cornerstone of modern physics. When you're moving at constant velocity, no experiment conducted entirely within your frame of reference can reveal that motion. There's no privileged perspective from which to declare one frame of reference at rest and another in motion. All smooth, non-accelerating motion is relative. This relativity of motion means that from our perspective, sitting on the surface of Earth, we have every right to consider ourselves at rest. The stars wheel overhead, the sun rises and sets, but we remain still. Ancient astronomers built entire cosmological systems on this perception, placing Earth at the center of creation with everything else revolving around us. They weren't being foolish or arrogant. They were simply taking seriously what their senses told them, what any reasonable person would conclude from direct observation. It took centuries of careful measurement, mathematical reasoning, and willingness to trust mathematics over intuition before humanity accepted that our perceived stillness is an illusion, that we're passengers on a planet spinning through space at breathtaking speeds. The illusion persists even now that we know better. You can read about Earth's rotation, calculate the velocities involved, understand the astronomical observations that prove our motion through space, yet when you step outside and feel the solid ground beneath your feet, that knowledge remains abstract. The concrete reality of your senses insists that you're standing still. This tension between knowledge and perception highlights something important about how we relate to the cosmos. We're creatures of a particular scale, adapted to a narrow band of temperatures, pressures, and velocities. The universe at large operates according to rules and rhythms that exceed our intuitive grasp. We can understand them through mathematics and observation, but we can't directly feel them in our bones. Inertia plays the crucial role in maintaining this illusion of stillness. An object in motion tends to remain in motion unless acted upon by an external force. When you're sitting in a smoothly moving vehicle, you move with the vehicle. There's no force acting to distinguish you from your surroundings. Only when the vehicle accelerates, brakes, or turns do you feel pressed against your seat or pulled forward. And even then, what you're feeling isn't the motion itself, but the change in motion, the acceleration. Earth rotates at constant angular velocity, meaning that while points on its surface trace circular paths through space, the rotation rate itself remains steady. We're accelerating in the technical sense because we're constantly changing direction, but this centripetal acceleration is exactly balanced by the gravitational force holding us to the planet's surface. The net effect, for human perception, is indistinguishable from being at rest. This explains why ancient peoples could be forgiven for thinking Earth stationary, but it raises a deeper question. Why does the universe exhibit so much rotation in the first place? Why isn't everything moving in straight lines, as Newton's first law of motion might suggest? The answer reaches back to the very beginning of the universe itself, to the conditions that prevailed in the earliest moments after the Big Bang, and the physical principles that have governed cosmic evolution ever since. Rotation appears to be baked into the structure of reality at the most fundamental level. In the primordial universe, tiny quantum fluctuations in the density and momentum of matter created slight irregularities in an otherwise smooth distribution of energy and particles. As the universe expanded and cooled, these fluctuations grew into larger structures through gravitational attraction. Denser regions pulled in surrounding matter, growing more massive over time. But here's the key point. Even the slightest asymmetry in how matter fell into these growing structures would impart angular momentum to the system. If particles approached from slightly different directions, not perfectly aligned with the center of mass, their motion would combine to set the entire structure spinning. Angular momentum, like energy, is conserved in physical systems. Once a rotating cloud of gas began to spin, it couldn't stop unless something transferred that angular momentum elsewhere. As the cloud collapsed under its own gravity, growing denser and more compact, conservation of angular momentum demanded that it spin faster, just as a figure skater spins faster when pulling their arms inward. This process, repeated countless times throughout the early universe, seeded rotation at every scale. Galaxies formed from rotating clouds of gas and dark matter. Within those galaxies, smaller clouds collapsed to form stars, taking on the rotation of their parent structures and adding their own. Around those forming stars, disks of gas and dust inherited rotational momentum and eventually coalesced into planets, moons, and smaller bodies. The solar system's formation illustrates this beautifully. About 4.5 billion years ago, a massive cloud of interstellar gas and dust began to collapse under its own gravity, possibly triggered by the shockwave from a nearby supernova. This cloud possessed some small amount of initial rotation, perhaps inherited from the galaxy's own spin or induced by the gravitational influence of passing structures. As it collapsed, the cloud flattened into a disk, with most of the mass falling toward the center where our sun would form. The disk's rotation prevented matter from falling directly inward. Instead, particles orbited the growing proto-sun, colliding with each other, sticking together, gradually building up larger and larger bodies. The planets that eventually formed all orbit in roughly the same plane, the same direction, because they all inherited the angular momentum of that original rotating disk. Earth's own rotation likely arose from the countless collisions between smaller bodies during the planet's formation. Each impact carried momentum, and the sum of all those impacts left the young Earth spinning. The angle of Earth's rotation axis, tilted about 23.5 degrees relative to the plane of its orbit around the Sun, probably results from a massive collision early in Earth's history when a Mars-sized body struck our planet, ejecting debris that later coalesced to form the Moon. That collision not only gave us our natural satellite, but also set the parameters for Earth's rotation that would profoundly influence the development of life billions of years later. The Moon itself demonstrates another aspect of rotation's influence on cosmic structures. It orbits Earth, but it also rotates on its own axis at exactly the rate that matches its orbital period, which is why we always see the same face of the Moon from Earth. This synchronization isn't coincidental, but results from tidal forces. Earth's gravity creates bulges in the Moon's shape, and the friction generated as those bulges attempt to rotate relative to Earth's gravitational pull gradually slowed the Moon's rotation until it became locked, with one face always pointing toward Earth. Many moons throughout the solar system show this same tidal locking, demonstrating how rotation at one scale influences and constrains rotation at another. Rotation also played a crucial role in determining which planets developed conditions suitable for life. Earth's rotation creates the cycle of day and night, distributing solar energy around the planet rather than leaving one hemisphere in perpetual daylight and the other in endless darkness. This rotation helps drive atmospheric circulation, mixing heat from the equator toward the poles, creating weather patterns and climate zones. The length of Earth's day affects everything from temperature variations to the evolution of circadian rhythms in living organisms. If Earth rotated much faster, the violent weather patterns might have prevented the emergence of complex life. If it rotated much slower, Temperature extremes between day and night could have made the surface uninhabitable. Jupiter's rapid rotation, completing a full turn in less than 10 hours despite its enormous size, creates the powerful atmospheric dynamics visible in its banded clouds and massive storms like the Great Red Spot. The gas giant's rotation helps maintain its strong magnetic field, which in turn shields its moons from harmful radiation. Europa, one of those moons, may harbor a subsurface ocean heated in part by tidal forces generated through its orbital and rotational relationship with Jupiter. If life exists in that hidden ocean, it owes its existence to the complex dance of rotations and orbits that have characterized the Jupiter system for billions of years. Looking beyond our solar system, astronomers have discovered that rotation influences planetary systems around other stars in similar ways. Some exoplanets orbit their stars so closely that they become tidally locked, always presenting the same face to their sun. These worlds experience permanent day on one side and eternal night on the other, with a narrow twilight zone between where conditions might allow for liquid water and possibly life. Other exoplanets orbit in systems where multiple stars revolve around each other, creating incredibly complex patterns of rotation and revolution that challenge our understanding of how stable planetary systems can form and persist. At larger scales, the rotation of galaxies themselves creates some of the most striking and beautiful structures in the universe. Spiral galaxies like our Milky Way exhibit elegant, sweeping arms of stars, gas, and dust that curve outward from a bright central bulge. These spiral arms aren't fixed structures but density waves, regions where the rotation of the galaxy temporarily compresses material, triggering new star formation. Stars move in and out of these arms as they orbit the galactic center, much as cars on a highway might slow down passing through a traffic jam. The rotation rate of the galaxy as a whole doesn't match the apparent rotation of the spiral pattern, a phenomenon that puzzled astronomers for decades until they developed the density wave theory to explain it. Even the shape of galaxies depends on rotation. Spiral galaxies possess significant angular momentum, which manifests in their flat, rotating disk structure. Elliptical galaxies, by contrast, formed through collisions and mergers that randomize the motions of their stars, leaving them with little net rotation. The stars in an elliptical galaxy move in chaotic, randomly oriented orbits rather than the orderly, mostly circular orbits seen in spiral galaxies. The difference in rotation fundamentally alters the character of these galactic systems, affecting everything from their star formation rates to their eventual fate. The intimate connection between rotation and time itself becomes apparent when we consider how we measure time. A day is defined by Earth's rotation on its axis. A year is defined by Earth's revolution around the sun. These fundamental units of human timekeeping are literally rotations, cosmic wheels turning at different rates. Before the development of atomic clocks, all human timekeeping ultimately referenced astronomical observations of rotating and revolving bodies. Even now, we periodically add leap seconds to our atomic timescale to keep it synchronized with Earth's rotation, which gradually slows due to tidal friction with the Moon. This slowing of Earth's rotation reminds us that nothing in the universe remains constant forever. The Moon raises tides on Earth, and the friction from those moving masses of water acts like a brake on our planet's spin. Simultaneously, through conservation of angular momentum, the Moon slowly moves away from Earth, its orbit expanding by about 1.5 inches each year. 4 billion years ago, when Earth and Moon were both young, a day lasted only about 6 hours, and the Moon loomed much larger in the sky, orbiting far closer to Earth. Billions of years in the future, Earth's rotation will slow further, perhaps eventually becoming tidally locked to the Moon, just as the Moon is already locked to Earth, if the Sun doesn't expand to engulf both worlds first as it evolves into a red giant. The gradual changes in Earth's rotation have left traces in the geological record. Growth patterns in ancient corals and shells reveal the length of days and years in the distant past. These biological clocks recorded cosmic time through the rhythms of life itself, preserving evidence that Earth once spun faster and the Moon once orbited closer. This connection between cosmic motion and biological rhythms runs deeper than simple recording. Life evolved in the context of Earth's rotation, and that rotation shaped the internal clocks that govern nearly all living things. Circadian rhythms, the roughly 24-hour cycles that regulate sleep, metabolism, hormone production, and countless other biological processes exist in organisms ranging from bacteria to humans. These internal clocks aren't learned behaviors, but genetically encoded mechanisms that evolved in response to the reliable cycle of day and night created by Earth's rotation. Even when isolated from external time cues in laboratory conditions, organisms maintain these rhythms, demonstrating that the cycle is internalized. The genes responsible for circadian rhythms are remarkably ancient and conserved across vastly different species, suggesting that this adaptation arose very early in the history of life and has been maintained through billions of years of evolution because of its fundamental importance. Plants track the sun's movement across the sky, a phenomenon called heliotropism, optimizing their exposure to sunlight through the day. This behavior requires an internal sense of time synchronized with Earth's rotation. Animals time their activities to coincide with periods when food is available, predators are scarce, or temperatures are favorable. Intertidal organisms must track not just the daily rotation of Earth, but also the lunar cycle that drives the tides, coordinating their feeding and reproduction with the rising and falling water levels. The migration patterns of birds and the spawning cycles of fish often synchronize with seasonal changes driven by Earth's axial tilt and revolution around the sun. Human beings are no exception to this cosmic influence. We evolved as diurnal creatures adapted to be active during daylight and rest during darkness, and our biology reflects that history. Disrupting circadian rhythms through shift work, jet lag, or simply staying awake with artificial lighting carries real health consequences, increasing risks for everything from cardiovascular disease to mental health problems. Our brains and bodies expect the rhythm of rotation, the regular alternation of light and dark that has characterized existence on this planet for billions of years. When we fight against that rhythm, we struggle because we're working against patterns etched into our genes by eons of evolutionary time. The connection runs even deeper than circadian rhythms. The very metabolism of life, the chemical reactions that power cells and organisms, evolved in an environment shaped by rotation. Photosynthesis captures energy from sunlight, but that sunlight arrives in a rhythm determined by Earth's spin. The temperature fluctuations between day and night affect reaction rates and create selective pressures that influenced how organisms manage energy and resources. The mixing of ocean waters through currents driven partly by Earth's rotation distributes nutrients and oxygen, creating habitable zones where life can flourish. Remove rotation from Earth's history, and the resulting world would be so different that it's difficult to imagine life as we know it emerging at all. Consider the Coriolis effect, a consequence of Earth's rotation that deflects moving objects to the right in the northern hemisphere and to the left in the southern hemisphere. This effect influences ocean currents and atmospheric circulation, helping to create the trade winds, jet streams, and major ocean gyres that distribute heat around the planet. These circulation patterns moderate temperature extremes, transport moisture inland to create rainfall, and maintain the climate zones that different ecosystems depend upon. Hurricanes and cyclones rotate because of the Coriolis effect, spinning counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern, their structure and power directly tied to Earth's angular momentum. Human navigation and culture bear the marks of rotation as well. Before GPS satellites and electronic instruments, sailors and travelers relied on celestial navigation, tracking the apparent rotation of stars around the celestial poles to determine latitude and maintain course across featureless oceans. The predictable patterns created by Earth's rotation and revolution allowed ancient peoples to develop calendars, schedule agricultural activities, and mark the passage of seasons with festivals and ceremonies. Many religious and cultural practices synchronize with astronomical events tied to Earth's motion through space, from solstices and equinoxes to lunar phases and planetary conjunctions. The entire human conception of direction depends on rotation. North and south are defined by Earth's rotation axis. East and west represent the direction of sunrise and sunset, consequences of our planet's spin. Latitude and longitude, the coordinate system we use to specify locations, reference the rotation axis and equator. Even our sense of up and down connects to rotation. Up points away from Earth's center, roughly aligned with the local perpendicular to the surface, while down points toward the center. This definition only makes sense for a roughly spherical, rotating body. On a different world with different rotation characteristics, the very meaning of direction might shift. Human-built structures reflect our adaptation to rotation as well, though often in subtle ways. Architects in the Northern Hemisphere design buildings to maximize southern exposure, capturing winter sunlight whose angle results from Earth's axial tilt and orbital motion. Farmers plant crops considering the direction and intensity of sunlight through the growing season, another consequence of rotation and revolution. Even something as mundane as the drainage patterns in your sink might be influenced by rotation, though the Coriolis effect at such small scales is typically overwhelmed by other factors like the shape of the basin and initial water motion. The rotation of Earth generates another critical protective feature: our magnetic field. Deep within the planet, the liquid iron outer core flows in complex patterns driven by convection and shaped by Earth's rotation. This moving conductor generates electric currents, which in turn create magnetic fields, a process called the geodynamo. The resulting planetary magnetic field extends far into space, creating the magnetosphere that deflects most of the charged particles streaming from the sun in the solar wind. Without this magnetic shield, Earth's atmosphere would gradually be stripped away by the solar wind, much as appears to have happened to Mars after its magnetic field weakened and eventually disappeared. Life on the surface would face lethal radiation levels. Our existence as terrestrial organisms breathing an atmosphere owes a debt to the rotation that powers Earth's magnetic dynamo. Other planets demonstrate the importance of this connection. Jupiter's rapid rotation and metallic hydrogen interior create the solar system's most powerful planetary magnetic field. Saturn, also a rapid rotator with a conductive interior, possesses a strong magnetic field as well. Venus rotates very slowly, taking longer to complete one rotation than to orbit the Sun, and correspondingly has only a weak induced magnetic field. Mars, small enough that its interior cooled and solidified relatively quickly, lost its magnetic field billions of years ago and has since lost most of its atmosphere. The correlation isn't perfect because other factors matter too, but rotation clearly plays a significant role in determining whether a planet can maintain a protective magnetic environment. At quantum scales, rotation manifests as a fundamental property called spin. Elementary particles possess intrinsic angular momentum that behaves mathematically like rotation, though it doesn't correspond to literal spinning in the classical sense. Electrons, protons, quarks, and other particles have spin values that determine how they interact with each other and with fields. The Pauli exclusion principle, which states that no two fermions can occupy the same quantum state simultaneously, depends on spin. This principle underlies the structure of atoms, determining how electrons arrange themselves in shells and orbitals, which in turn determines chemical properties and bonding behavior. The entire edifice of chemistry, and therefore biology, rests on the quantum mechanical property of spin. The rotation embedded at quantum scales creates effects that ripple upward through every level of organization in the universe. When particles combine to form atoms, and atoms combine to form molecules, rotational properties become inherited characteristics that shape behavior at larger scales. Water molecules, for instance, possess rotational modes that influence how they absorb and emit energy, how they form hydrogen bonds, and how they transition between solid, liquid, and gaseous states. The rotation of these molecules affects everything from the flow of rivers to the formation of clouds to the biochemical reactions that sustained life. Proteins, those workhorses of biological systems, fold into three-dimensional structures partly through rotational dynamics. The bonds between amino acids allow rotation around certain axes, creating conformational flexibility that enables proteins to function as molecular machines. Enzymes twist and turn as they catalyze reactions, their rotational movements facilitating the breaking and forming of chemical bonds. The very mechanisms of life depend on molecules that can rotate, flex, and change shape in response to their environment. DNA itself exhibits rotational properties that prove essential to its function. The famous double helix twists as it winds, creating a structure that must be unwound and rotated for replication and transcription to occur. Specialized enzymes called topoisomerases manage the rotational stress that builds up when DNA strands separate, preventing the molecule from becoming hopelessly tangled. Without the ability to manage rotational dynamics at the molecular level, genetic information could not be copied or expressed, and life as we understand it would be impossible. Consider the rotation present in cellular structures and processes. Bacterial flagella spin like tiny propellers, driven by molecular motors that rotate hundreds of times per second. These rotary engines, powered by the flow of protons across cell membranes, allow bacteria to navigate their environment with remarkable efficiency. The evolution of rotary motion at the molecular level represents one of nature's most elegant solutions to the problem of movement at microscopic scales. Even within cells that don't swim, rotation plays crucial roles. The machinery that produces ATP, the energy currency of life, includes a component called ATP synthase that functions as a rotary motor. As protons flow through this molecular machine, part of it physically spins, driving the synthesis of ATP molecules. Every time you move, think, or breathe, rotary molecular motors are spinning inside your cells, converting chemical gradients into the energy that powers biological processes. The emergence of multicellular life introduced new scales of rotation and movement. Early organisms began coordinating the movement of cilia and flagella, creating flows and currents in their watery environments. These coordinated rotational movements allowed cells to pump fluids, capture food particles, and eventually develop rudimentary circulatory and digestive systems. The ability to generate and control rotational motion at multiple scales became a defining feature of complex life. As organisms evolved sensory systems, they developed ways to detect rotation and maintain orientation. The vestibular system in vertebrates uses fluid-filled canals containing tiny hair cells that respond to rotational acceleration. When your head turns, the inertia of the fluid causes it to lag behind, bending the hair cells and triggering neural signals that inform your brain about the rotation. This exquisite system allows organisms to maintain balance and spatial orientation, to distinguish up from down, and to coordinate complex movements through three-dimensional space. The evolution of vision introduced another dimension of rotational sensitivity. Many animals, including humans, possess specialized neurons that respond to rotational motion in the visual field. These neurons help detect rotating objects, track moving targets, and process the complex patterns of motion that occur during self-movement through the environment. The ability to perceive and interpret rotation became increasingly important as organisms evolved more sophisticated behaviors and inhabited more complex ecological niches. Plants, though rooted in place, exhibit remarkable sensitivity to rotation. Gravitropism, the ability to sense and respond to gravity, depends on specialized cells containing dense starch granules called statoliths. These granules settle to the bottom of cells under gravitational influence, triggering biochemical cascades that cause roots to grow downward and shoots to grow upward. But plants also respond to rotation itself. If you place a seedling on a rotating platform, it will attempt to compensate for the apparent change in gravitational direction, demonstrating that even sessile organisms possess mechanisms to detect and respond to rotational motion. The phenomenon of circumnutation, where plant shoots and roots exhibit spiral growth patterns, reveals deep connections between rotation and plant development. As plants grow, their tips often trace elliptical or circular paths through space, a behavior that appears to facilitate the exploration of the environment and the navigation around obstacles. Charles Darwin, in one of his later works, devoted extensive study to this rotational behavior in plants, recognizing it as a fundamental aspect of plant movement and growth. Climbing plants demonstrate even more dramatic rotational behaviors. The shoots of many vines rotate as they grow, sweeping through space in search of supports. Once contact is made, the rotation often continues, wrapping the stem around its support structure. The direction of rotation is typically species-specific, with some plants always twining clockwise and others counterclockwise, suggesting that rotational handedness is genetically determined and evolutionarily conserved. The presence of rotational motion at every scale of life suggests that organisms have not merely adapted to a rotating universe, but have incorporated rotation as a fundamental operational principle. From molecular motors to cellular appendages to whole organism movements, rotation serves as a solution to countless biological challenges. This should perhaps not surprise us, given that organisms evolved on a rotating planet, orbiting a star that itself moves through a rotating galaxy. The rotational dynamics of the cosmos have been inscribed into the very fabric of life. The cycles that structure biological time also connect to cosmic rotation. The circadian rhythms that regulate sleep and wakefulness, metabolism, and hormone production arise from the rotation of Earth. These internal clocks, present in organisms from bacteria to humans, anticipate the daily cycle of light and darkness that results from planetary spin. The molecular mechanisms underlying circadian rhythms involve feedback loops of gene expression that take approximately 24 hours to complete, matching the period of Earth's rotation with remarkable precision. But circadian clocks don't merely respond to environmental cues, they persist even in the absence of external time signals, demonstrating that organisms have internalized the rotational period of their planet. Put a person in a cave with no access to daylight, and their sleep-wake cycle will continue with a period close to 24 hours. The rotation of Earth has been so reliable over evolutionary time that organisms have built internal representations of it into their very genes. Other biological rhythms connect to different cosmic cycles. Tidal rhythms, present in many coastal organisms, reflect the combined rotational effects of Earth, Moon, and Sun. Monthly and annual rhythms track the orbit of the Moon around Earth and Earth around the Sun. The entire temporal architecture of life appears tuned to the rotational and orbital motions that characterize our corner of the cosmos. Some researchers have proposed that even subcellular processes may show rhythmic patterns linked to geophysical cycles. The synthesis of certain proteins, the division of cells, and the activity of various metabolic pathways have been reported to follow cyclic patterns that align with daily, lunar, or annual periods. If true, this would suggest that biological time is intimately connected to cosmic motion at scales ranging from molecular interactions to whole organism behaviors. The relationship between biological time and cosmic rotation raises profound questions about the nature of time itself. Does time exist independently of motion, or is our experience of temporal flow fundamentally linked to the rotational and orbital motions that structure our environment? In a universe without rotation, without planetary spin or orbital motion, would organisms experience time in the same way? These questions touch on deep issues in philosophy and physics, but they also have practical implications for understanding how life adapts to different temporal environments. Organisms transported away from Earth's surface experience disruptions to their biological rhythms. Astronauts in orbit, experiencing a sunrise every 90 minutes as the space station circles Earth, often struggle with sleep and circadian misalignment. The disconnect between their biological clocks, calibrated to a 24-hour rotation, and their actual rotational period around the planet, creates physiological stress. This suggests that the match between internal biological time and external cosmic rotation is not merely coincidental but functionally important. As humans contemplate long-duration spaceflight to other planets, these issues become more pressing. Mars rotates with a period of about 24 hours and 40 minutes, close enough to Earth that adaptation might be manageable. But what about moons of Jupiter with much shorter or longer rotational periods? Could humans adapt their circadian rhythms to match these different rotations, or would artificial lighting and scheduling be required to maintain Earth-like cycles? The answers to these questions will determine not just the comfort, but potentially the health and survival of future space explorers. The connection between cosmic rotation and biological time extends to seasonal patterns as well. The tilt of Earth's axis, combined with its orbital motion, creates annual variations in day length and solar angle that drive seasonal changes. Many organisms have evolved photoperiodic responses, using day length as a cue to time seasonal behaviors like migration, hibernation, reproduction, and flowering. These responses represent another way that cosmic motion has been internalized by living systems, creating adaptive timing mechanisms that anticipate regular environmental changes. Birds migrating thousands of miles between summer and winter ranges coordinate their departures with photoperiodic cues, beginning their journeys when day length reaches critical thresholds. Plants initiate flowering based on the duration of darkness, measuring the length of nights with molecular precision. These seasonal timers allow organisms to synchronize their life cycles with reliable astronomical cues, demonstrating once again how deeply cosmic motion has shaped the evolution of life. The navigational abilities of migrating animals provide another striking example of organisms tuning into cosmic motion. Many species use the sun as a compass, compensating for its apparent motion across the sky by consulting their internal circadian clocks. A bird that knows the sun moves at approximately 15 degrees per hour can use its current position relative to that expected motion to determine direction. This sophisticated integration of celestial observation and internal timing allows navigation across vast distances, connecting the rotation of the planet with the seasonal movements of life across its surface. Night migrants often use stars for navigation, and some species appear to use the rotation of the celestial sphere around the North Star to orient themselves. Young birds must learn the pattern of stellar rotation during their development, suggesting that they literally calibrate their navigational systems using the rotation of Earth. The connection between cosmic motion and animal behavior could hardly be more direct. Even the magnetic field that many animals use for navigation ultimately connects to planetary rotation. Earth's magnetic field is generated by the rotation of the liquid iron core, creating a geodynamo that produces the field lines animals can sense and follow. The convection currents in the core that produce this field are themselves influenced by the Coriolis effect resulting from Earth's rotation. Migrating birds, sea turtles, and other animals following magnetic field lines are, in a sense, navigating using a map created by the rotation of the planet beneath them. The fact that life has evolved such intimate connections with cosmic rotation suggests that motion at astronomical scales provides stable, reliable cues that organisms can exploit. The rotation of Earth has remained remarkably constant over evolutionary time, creating a dependable framework around which biological systems could evolve. In a universe that is dynamic and ever-changing, the regular rotation of celestial bodies provides islands of predictability that life can use to structure its activities. This reliability stems partly from the conservation of angular momentum. Once a celestial body is rotating, that rotation tends to persist unless acted upon by external torques. The Moon gradually slows Earth's rotation through tidal forces, but this process occurs on timescales of millions of years, far too slow to be noticeable within the lifetime of any organism or even most species. From the perspective of biological evolution, Earth's rotation appears essentially eternal and unchanging, a cosmic constant that can be safely incorporated into the design of living systems. The emergence of human civilization added new layers to the relationship between cosmic rotation and daily life. The development of agriculture required careful attention to seasons, leading to astronomical observations and the creation of calendars. The ability to predict seasonal changes based on celestial motions represented a major advance in human understanding and allowed the reliable planning of planting and harvest. The rotation of Earth around the Sun, manifesting as the seasonal cycle, became perhaps the most important temporal pattern structuring human societies. The division of the day into hours, minutes, and seconds reflects an attempt to partition the rotation of Earth into manageable units. Early timekeeping devices like sundials directly measured the apparent rotation of the Sun across the sky, and later innovations like water clocks and mechanical clocks sought to maintain consistent subdivision of the day regardless of season or weather, but they were still ultimately calibrated against the rotation of the planet. Even atomic clocks, which now define the second based on the vibration frequency of cesium atoms, must be occasionally adjusted through leap seconds to keep synchronized with Earth's slightly irregular rotation. The establishment of time zones around the globe represents an acknowledgement that our experience of solar time depends on our rotational position relative to the Sun. A person standing on the opposite side of Earth experiences noon while you experience midnight, a consequence of planetary rotation that necessitates coordinated systems for referencing time across distances. The international dateline, so it's an imaginary boundary where the calendar date changes, marks the point where a full rotation around the planet brings you back to the longitude where you started but a day later in time. These human conventions attempt to impose order on the temporal complexity arising from living on a rotating sphere. Modern technology has both liberated and complicated our relationship with cosmic rotation. Electric lighting allows activities to continue regardless of the day-night cycle, enabling shift work and 24-hour operations that would have been impossible in earlier eras. Air travel allows us to cross time zones rapidly, outpacing the rotation of the planet beneath us and experiencing the jet lag that results from our internal clocks falling out of sync with local solar time. Satellite communications require precise timing adjustments to account for the relative motion of transmitters and receivers as they circle the rotating planet. GPS navigation, used by millions of people daily, depends critically on accounting for both the rotation of Earth and the relativistic effects of orbital motion. GPS satellites carry atomic clocks that tick at slightly different rates than clocks on the surface due to differences in gravitational field strength and velocity. Engineers must program the satellite clocks to tick at adjusted rates to compensate for these relativistic effects, or else the system would accumulate errors of several kilometers per day. Every time you use GPS to find your way, relativistic corrections arising from rotation and orbital motion are working behind the scenes to provide accurate positioning. The structure of modern communication networks reflects the rotating geometry of our planet. Geostationary satellites, parked in orbits where their period matches Earth's rotation, appear to hover over fixed points on the equator. This allows ground stations to maintain constant contact without needing to track moving targets across the sky. The altitude required for such an orbit, approximately 36,000 kilometers, is determined by the balance between gravitational force and the centrifugal effect required to match Earth's rotational period. Our technological infrastructure has literally shaped itself around the rotation of the planet. As human activities expand beyond Earth, the mismatch between our biological rhythms and local rotational periods becomes increasingly apparent. The International Space Station, completing an orbit every 90 minutes, creates a disorienting environment where traditional concepts of day and night lose meaning. Astronauts follow artificial schedules maintained through controlled lighting and strictly observed routines, but many report persistent sleep problems and circadian disruption. The human body, shaped by millions of years of evolution on a planet with a 24-hour rotation, struggles to adapt when that fundamental rhythm is disrupted. Future missions to other bodies in the solar system will face varied rotational challenges. Mercury rotates 3 times for every 2 orbits around the Sun, creating a complex solar day lasting 176 Earth days. Venus rotates so slowly that its day is longer than its year, and it spins in the opposite direction from most planets. The large moons of Jupiter are tidally locked, always showing the same face to their parent planet, and experience complex patterns of eclipses and stellar occultation as they orbit within Jupiter's shadow. Establishing human presence in these environments will require careful consideration of how rotational periods affect biological function and psychological well-being. The relationship between rotation and life extends even to the molecular machinery of genetics. The structure of DNA, with its right-handed helical twist, exhibits molecular chirality that may connect to fundamental asymmetries in the universe. Why do all terrestrial organisms use right-handed DNA and left-handed amino acids? This universal handedness suggests a common origin for all life, but it also raises questions about whether physical forces related to rotation or other directional phenomena might have influenced the selection of specific molecular configurations during the origin of life. Some researchers have proposed that the Coriolis effect, arising from Earth's rotation, might have played a role in concentrating organic molecules and promoting the chemical reactions that led to the first living systems. In rotating fluids, the Coriolis effect can create circulating patterns that transport and concentrate materials, potentially bringing reactive molecules into closer proximity. While speculative, such ideas illustrate how rotation at planetary scales might have influenced the chemistry that gave rise to life. The emergence of self-replicating systems required molecules capable of storing information and catalyzing reactions. The 3-dimensional shapes that enable these functions depend on rotational degrees of freedom in molecular bonds. Proteins fold into functional configurations through rotations around backbone bonds, creating the diverse array of shapes needed for enzymatic activity, structural support, and molecular recognition. Nucleic acids coil into helices through rotational arrangements of their sugar-phosphate backbones. The very possibility of molecular complexity, and thus life, rests on the rotational flexibility of chemical bonds. Consider the process of translation, where ribosomes read messenger RNA and synthesize proteins. The ribosome, a massive molecular machine composed of RNA and protein, undergoes conformational changes as it moves along the mRNA strand. These changes involve rotational movements of various domains, allowing the ribosome to bind transfer RNAs, catalyze peptide bond formation, and translocate to the next codon. The entire process of protein synthesis, fundamental to all life, depends on coordinated rotational motions at the molecular level. The evolution of metabolism also reflects the importance of rotational dynamics. Many metabolic enzymes function by binding substrates in active sites shaped through specific rotational configurations of amino acid side chains. The catalytic mechanism often involves subtle rotational shifts that bring reactive groups into proper alignment, lower activation energies, and facilitate the breaking and forming of chemical bonds. The efficiency of metabolism depends on the precision with which these rotational movements can be controlled and coordinated. Signal transduction, the process by which cells respond to external stimuli, frequently involves proteins that change shape when activated. G-protein-coupled receptors, which respond to hormones, neurotransmitters, and other signaling molecules, undergo conformational changes involving rotational movements when they bind their ligands. These rotational shifts trigger cascades of downstream effects that ultimately alter cell behavior. The ability to convert external signals into internal responses depends critically on molecular machines that can rotate, twist, and change configuration in controlled ways. The development of multicellular organisms introduced new scales of rotational organization. During embryonic development, coordinated cell movements sculpt the body plan through processes like gastrulation, where cell sheets fold and invaginate to create internal structures. These movements involve rotational components as cells change their orientations and trajectories. The formation of spiraling structures from the cochlea of the inner ear to the loops of the intestine reflects the importance of rotational morphogenesis in creating complex anatomical forms. The growth of many organisms exhibits rotational patterns. Plants grow through apical meristems that produce cells in spiraling patterns described by the Fibonacci sequence, creating the spiral arrangement of leaves, petals, and scales seen in Phyllotaxis. These patterns arise from the physics of packing and growth at the growing tip, but they create striking rotational geometries that repeat across vast numbers of plant species. The ubiquity of such patterns suggests they represent optimal solutions to geometric constraints, solutions discovered through evolution and implemented through developmental programs. The connection between physical rotation and biological pattern formation extends beyond simple spiral arrangements. The very processes that enable life to emerge and persist are intimately tied to rotational phenomena at molecular scales. Enzymes, the catalysts that make biological chemistry possible, often rely on conformational changes that involve rotational movements of molecular domains. These proteins twist and rotate parts of their structure to bring reactive groups together, to open and close binding sites, or to transfer chemical groups from one location to another. The rotation of chemical bonds, the spinning of molecular motors, and the helical twisting of DNA all represent rotational motion at the smallest scales of biological organization. Consider the extraordinary molecular machines that power cellular life. A TP synthase, the enzyme responsible for generating most of the chemical energy in living cells, operates as a literal rotary motor. As protons flow through part of the enzyme complex, they cause a central shaft to rotate, and this rotation drives the synthesis of ATP molecules. The enzyme spins at remarkable speeds, completing hundreds of rotations per second, converting the energy stored in proton gradients into chemical bonds. This molecular turbine represents one of the most direct connections between rotation and life, a microscopic spinning mechanism that has powered biological processes for billions of years. Similarly, bacterial flagella operate as rotary motors, with protein complexes that spin the whip-like appendages that propel bacteria through liquid environments. These motors can rotate at hundreds of revolutions per second, can reverse direction within milliseconds, and achieve remarkable efficiency in converting chemical energy into rotational motion. The existence of these biological rotary motors suggests that rotation is not merely a feature of astronomical objects, but a fundamental aspect of how energy and motion are organized across all scales of nature. The helical structure of DNA itself embodies rotational geometry. The double helix twists through space in a right-handed spiral, with one complete turn occurring approximately every 10 base pairs. This twisted structure isn't merely decorative, but serves essential functions. The rotation of the helix creates major and minor grooves that proteins recognize and bind to, allowing the information stored in the DNA sequence to be read and regulated. When DNA is replicated or transcribed, enzymes must unwind the helix, creating rotational stress that propagates along the molecule. Specialized enzymes called topoisomerases manage this rotational tension by temporarily cutting the DNA strand, allowing it to rotate, then resealing the break. Without these rotational management systems, the simple act of reading genetic information would create insurmountable tangles. The relationship between rotation and information storage extends to the way organisms sense and respond to their environment. Many sensory systems involve rotating or spiraling structures. The cochlea of the mammalian inner ear forms a spiral structure that processes different sound frequencies at different positions along its length, effectively decomposing complex sounds into their constituent frequencies through the geometry of its coiled form. Certain single-celled organisms possess light-sensitive regions arranged in spiral patterns that allow them to detect the direction of light sources by comparing signals as they rotate through the water. Even the way neurons process information involves ionic flows and electrochemical waves that can exhibit rotational dynamics. These microscopic rotations connect upward through scales to influence larger biological rhythms and behaviors. Many organisms exhibit circadian rhythms, roughly 24-hour cycles of biological activity that persist even in the absence of external time cues. While these internal clocks are driven by molecular feedback loops involving gene expression and protein synthesis, their approximately 24-hour period reflects the evolutionary history of life on a rotating planet. The circadian clock represents an internalized echo of Earth's rotation, a biological timekeeper that evolved to anticipate the predictable alternation of day and night caused by planetary spin. But circadian rhythms aren't perfectly synchronized with Earth's rotation. When isolated from external time cues, most organisms exhibit circadian periods that differ slightly from exactly 24 hours, typically ranging from about 23 to 25 hours. This slight mismatch reveals that the circadian clock doesn't directly measure Earth's rotation, but rather evolved to approximate it. Daily exposure to light resets the biological clock, entraining it to the exact period of planetary rotation. This entrainment process demonstrates how cosmic rotation shapes biological function without determining it absolutely. Life evolved mechanisms that anticipate and respond to rotation rather than passively reflecting it. Beyond daily rhythms, organisms exhibit longer biological cycles that connect to other astronomical periodicities. Many marine organisms synchronize their reproductive behavior with lunar cycles, releasing eggs and sperm in coordinated fashion during particular phases of the moon. These lunar rhythms likely evolved because tides, which are generated by the moon's orbit and Earth's rotation, create predictable environmental conditions. The monthly rhythm of the lunar cycle reflects the orbital motion of the moon around Earth, another rotational phenomenon that life has internalized as a timing mechanism. Some organisms even exhibit annual rhythms that persist in constant conditions, suggesting internal representations of Earth's revolution around the sun. These biological timers demonstrate how life has evolved to embed cosmic periodicities into its internal workings. Rather than responding passively to external cycles, organisms actively generate rhythms that approximate astronomical periods, then use environmental cues to maintain synchronization. This approach offers advantages. Biological clocks allow organisms to anticipate predictable changes rather than merely reacting to them. A plant can prepare for dawn before the sun rises, activating photosynthetic machinery in advance. A marine animal can prepare for tidal changes before water levels shift. By internalizing the rotational rhythms of the cosmos, life gains the ability to act proactively in a cyclically changing world. The contemplation of these connections invites reflection on the nature of time itself. From a human perspective, time often seems to flow uniformly forward, a steady progression from past through present to future. Yet this subjective experience of time's passage exists alongside the objective periodicities created by cosmic rotation. Clocks measure time by counting regular cycles, whether the swing of a pendulum, the oscillation of a quartz crystal, or the vibration of cesium atoms. Even atomic clocks, the most precise timekeepers humans have created, measure time by counting rotational or oscillatory phenomena at atomic scales. The second, the fundamental unit of time in modern measurement systems, was historically defined as a fraction of Earth's rotation period. As precision improved, scientists recognized that Earth's rotation isn't perfectly constant. Tidal friction gradually slows the planet's spin, making days slightly longer over millions of years. Seasonal movements of mass in the atmosphere and oceans cause tiny variations in rotation rate. Earthquakes can slightly change the rotation period by redistributing mass within the planet. These variations led to redefining the second based on atomic transitions rather than planetary motion, yet the human experience of time remains fundamentally tied to Earth's spin. Our days, our calendars, and our sense of temporal rhythm all reference the rotation of the planet we inhabit. This dependence on rotation for time measurement reveals something profound about the relationship between motion and temporality. Time, as we experience and measure it, isn't a background dimension against which motion occurs, but rather emerges from motion itself. Without change, without periodic processes to count and compare, the concept of time becomes nebulous. Rotation provides some of the most regular, predictable motions in nature, making it an ideal basis for timekeeping. The spinning of planets, the orbiting of moons and satellites, the precession of gyroscopes, all provide cyclical motions that can be counted and used to quantify duration. Einstein's theories of relativity revealed that time isn't absolute but depends on motion and gravity. Time passes more slowly in strong gravitational fields, and for objects moving at high velocities relative to an observer. These relativistic effects become significant only at extreme velocities or near massive objects, but they demonstrate that time's passage is intimately connected to motion through spacetime. Rotation, as a form of motion, participates in these relativistic phenomena. A rotating frame of reference exhibits peculiar properties. Observers at different radii experience different relative velocities, and the entire rotating system can't be described using a single inertial reference frame. The relationship between rotation and relativity creates fascinating scenarios. Imagine a massive rotating cylinder or ring. The rotation creates effects similar to those near massive non-rotating objects, but with additional complexities. Some solutions to Einstein's field equations involving rotating matter produce closed, time-like curves, paths through space-time that loop back to their own past. While such solutions may not correspond to physical reality due to additional constraints, their mathematical existence reveals deep connections between rotation, gravity, and the structure of time itself. These theoretical considerations, while abstract, point to fundamental aspects of how rotation relates to the fabric of reality. Spacetime isn't merely a stage on which rotation occurs, but is shaped and structured by rotational motion. The distinction between rotating and non-rotating frames of reference, which seems straightforward in everyday experience, becomes deeply problematic when considered in the context of general relativity. The question of whether an object is truly rotating depends on the reference frame, yet rotation has observable consequences that seem to transcend choice of reference frame. The outward bulge of a rotating planet, the tension in a rotating cable, these effects appear regardless of perspective. This puzzle connects to something called Mach's principle, the idea that rotation should be defined relative to the distribution of matter in the universe rather than relative to absolute space. Ernst Mach proposed that when a body rotates, it rotates relative to the distant stars and the overall mass distribution of the cosmos. In this view, the inertial forces experienced in a rotating frame arise from interaction with all the matter in the universe. While Einstein's general relativity partially incorporates Machian ideas, the relationship remains complex and debated. The principle suggests a deep connection between local rotation and the global structure of the cosmos, a link between the spinning of a planet and the collective presence of all distant galaxies. Contemplating these ideas evokes a sense of profound interconnection. The rotation you don't feel as you stand on Earth's surface connects to rotations at every scale, from spinning molecules to rotating galaxies, all embedded in a spacetime that responds to and is shaped by motion. The stillness you perceive is relative, an artifact of sharing motion with your surroundings. Yet beneath this apparent stability lies a cosmos in constant rotation, a universe characterized by spinning motion from its smallest constituents to its largest structures. This recognition transforms the experience of stillness. Standing motionless feels different when you know you're spinning at hundreds of meters per second, orbiting the sun at tens of thousands of meters per second, circling the galactic center at hundreds of thousands of meters per second. The ground beneath your feet represents a reference frame in rapid motion relative to distant objects, yet within this frame, you experience rest. The paradox reveals the relational nature of motion. Velocity and rotation only have meaning relative to a chosen reference. There's no absolute stillness, no privileged frame at rest while all else moves. Everything rotates relative to something. The origin of all this rotation traces back to the earliest moments after the Big Bang. Quantum fluctuations in the primordial universe created tiny irregularities in density and motion. As regions collapsed under gravity to form the first structures, conservation of angular momentum amplified any initial rotation. The first stars, the first galaxies, all inherited angular momentum from the quantum noise of the early universe. Every subsequent generation of structure formation conserved and redistributed this primordial rotation. The spin of Earth, the orbits of planets, the rotation of your body's molecules, all ultimately derive from quantum fluctuations in the first instance of cosmic history. This connection between quantum origin and macroscopic rotation illustrates how the universe's history manifests in present phenomena. The rotation you experience and participate in carries information about cosmic initial conditions, about the distribution of angular momentum in the early universe, about the sequence of structure formation that led from primordial fluctuations to the present configuration of matter. Every rotating object serves as a memory of its formation history, a physical record of how it came to be and what processes shaped it. Life emerges from and participates in this vast rotational cosmos. The chemical processes that sustain living organisms involve molecular rotations. The daily rhythms that regulate biological activity reflect planetary spin. The evolution of life responds to cycles created by orbital and rotational motions. Even the left-right asymmetry of biological molecules, the fact that life preferentially uses left-handed amino acids and right-handed sugars, might connect to broken symmetries in the physics of rotating systems, though this remains speculative. Life doesn't merely exist in a rotating universe, but is constituted by and adapted to rotation at multiple scales. The perspective gained from understanding cosmic rotation changes how existence feels. Awareness of motion you can't perceive creates a subtle shift in consciousness. Knowing that stillness is relative, that rest is a localized condition within frames that themselves move through space at immense velocities, adds a dimension to experience. The solidity of the ground becomes less absolute, more relational. The stability of the environment reveals itself as a stability of relationships between moving parts rather than as fundamental immobility. This awareness needn't induce vertigo or anxiety. Instead, it can foster appreciation for the intricate coordination that makes stable experience possible. That you can walk across a room without noticing Earth's rotation requires precise matching between your motion and the planet's. That you can predict sunrise and sunset relies on the regularity of rotational motion. That you exist at all depends on the rotational flattening of the primordial solar system disk, the centrifugal concentration of matter that enabled planet formation. The rotation you don't feel shapes the conditions that allow you to feel anything. The contemplation invites consideration of what else might be present but imperceptible. If rotation at hundreds of meters per second produces no sensory signal when shared with surroundings, what other motions or processes might occur beyond the threshold of perception? The Earth passes through dark matter as it orbits the galaxy, yet this mysterious substance interacts too weakly to register on human senses. Neutrinos stream through every atom of your body in vast numbers, carrying information from the sun's core, from distant supernovae, from the cosmic neutrino background left over from the Big Bang. These particles pass through matter almost without interaction, invisible messengers from extreme environments. Similarly, gravitational waves continuously stretch and compress space-time as they propagate across the universe from colliding black holes, merging neutron stars, and other violent cosmic events. These ripples in the fabric of reality pass through Earth and everything on it, causing distance itself to oscillate by infinitesimal amounts. Only the most sensitive instruments humanity has built can detect these waves, yet they represent another aspect of reality normally hidden from perception. The universe contains layers of phenomena operating at scales and intensities beyond unaided human detection. Rotation occupies an interesting position in this spectrum of the imperceptible. Unlike dark matter or neutrinos, rotation involves ordinary matter and forces that humans interact with constantly. The reason it goes unnoticed isn't that it's too subtle or too exotic, but that shared motion creates no relative change to detect. This makes the imperceptibility of rotation more striking in some ways. You're moving rapidly, affected by centrifugal and Coriolis forces, yet perfect adaptation to the rotating frame renders these effects invisible in ordinary experience. The unfelt rotation demonstrates how perception filters reality, highlighting changes and relationships while ignoring constant background conditions. This filtering makes evolutionary sense. Organisms need to detect changes that might signal opportunities or threats. A predator approaching creates changing sensory signals. A food source appears as a difference from background. But planetary rotation, present continuously throughout evolutionary history, created no selection pressure for direct perception. Instead, organisms evolved to operate within rotating frames, to internalize rotational rhythms as biological cycles, to use rotational constancy as a stable background against which to detect meaningful changes. The brain constructs experience not as raw sensory data, but as interpreted patterns emphasizing what matters for survival and reproduction. Yet humans possess something unusual among Earth's organisms: the cognitive capacity to understand motion we can't perceive, to use mathematics and instruments to reveal hidden aspects of reality, to know through reason what sense can't detect. The recognition of Earth's rotation represents a triumph of human thought, an insight gained not from direct perception, but from careful observation of astronomical patterns, from logical inference, and eventually from space-based observation that provides a view of the planet from outside its rotating frame. This ability to transcend perceptual limitations through abstract reasoning separates human understanding from the more immediate awareness of other organisms. The scientific understanding of cosmic rotation accumulated slowly over centuries. Ancient astronomers noticed the regular motions of celestial objects and developed models to predict them. The apparent rotation of the celestial sphere seemed most naturally explained by a rotating Earth, but competing models with a stationary Earth and rotating celestial sphere could also account for observations. Distinguishing between these models required subtle experiments and theoretical development. The gradual accumulation of evidence for Earth's rotation, from Foucault's pendulum to the measurement of centrifugal bulging to direct observation from space, illustrates how difficult it can be to recognize motions you share. The same pattern appears in understanding rotation at larger scales. The rotation of the galaxy wasn't recognized until the 20th century, when observations of stellar motions revealed the systematic pattern of galactic rotation. The measurement of galaxy rotation curves, showing that stars orbit faster than expected based on visible matter, provided the first strong evidence for dark matter. Each new scale of rotation required new observational techniques and theoretical frameworks to recognize and understand. The history of astronomy is partly a history of discovering rotations at ever larger scales. Looking forward, future observations will likely reveal more about rotation in extreme environments. The collision of black holes detected by gravitational wave observatories includes information about the rotation of these objects. The merging holes carry angular momentum that affects the gravitational waves they emit. By analyzing these signals, scientists can determine whether the black holes were spinning and how fast. Some black holes rotate at nearly the maximum rate allowed by general relativity, with their event horizons dragging space-time around them in a phenomenon called frame dragging. These extreme rotations demonstrate how angular momentum remains significant even in the most gravitationally intense environments in the universe. Similarly, neutron stars can rotate at astonishing rates. Pulsars, rotating neutron stars that emit beams of radiation, can spin hundreds of times per second. The fastest known pulsar completes more than 700 rotations every second, approaching the limit beyond which the star's surface would move at light speed. These incredibly dense objects, with masses greater than the Sun, compressed into volumes smaller than cities, rotate so rapidly because they conserved angular momentum as they collapsed from much larger progenitor stars. The rotation of neutron stars provides laboratories for testing physics under conditions impossible to replicate on Earth. The study of rotation in these extreme objects reveals physics operating at limits that everyday experience can't approach. Yet the same principles apply: conservation of angular momentum, the relationship between rotation and stability, the effects of rotation on shape and structure. The continuity of physical principles across scales from everyday objects to exotic cosmic phenomena demonstrates a unity in nature's laws. The rotation of a figure skater pulling in their arms to spin faster obeys the same angular momentum conservation that governs the spin-up of collapsing stellar cores. The same equations describe both, though the numbers differ by many orders of magnitude. This unity suggests that understanding gained from accessible phenomena applies, with appropriate modifications, to extreme situations. The intuition developed from experiencing rotation in everyday contexts, from turning in circles until dizzy, from riding merry-go-rounds, from watching water spiral down drains, all provides a foundation for understanding cosmic rotation. The abstractions of physics and mathematics build on this experiential foundation, extending insight beyond the range of direct perception. The child's joy of spinning becomes, through intellectual development, the physicist's understanding of angular momentum. The emotional and aesthetic dimensions of rotation deserve recognition alongside the scientific understanding. Spirals and circular motions carry cultural significance across human societies. Sacred dances often involve spinning or circular patterns. Mandalas use rotational symmetry to represent cosmic order. Mazes and labyrinths frequently employ spiral structures. The prevalence of rotational imagery in art, architecture, and ritual suggests that humans find deep meaning in circular and spiral forms, perhaps intuiting some connection to fundamental patterns in nature. The mathematical beauty of rotation appears in the elegant simplicity with which equations describe rotational motion. Angular velocity, angular acceleration, torque, angular momentum all find expression in mathematical forms that parallel the equations of linear motion, but with a distinctive character. The algebra of rotations involving vectors, cross products, and rotation matrices possesses internal consistency and structure that mathematicians and physicists find aesthetically pleasing. The fact that three-dimensional rotations don't commute, that rotating first around one axis then another produces a different result than rotating in the opposite order, reflects deep geometric truth. The quaternions, a number system extending complex numbers to 4 dimensions, provide one of the most elegant representations of three-dimensional rotations. Discovered in the 19th century, quaternions describe rotations more efficiently than matrices and avoid certain mathematical problems that arise in other representations. The mathematics of quaternions reveals unexpected connections between algebra and geometry, between number systems and spatial transformations. That rotations in physical space connect to abstract mathematical structures suggests a profound relationship between mathematical form and physical reality. This relationship between mathematics and physical rotation raises philosophical questions about the nature of both. Does mathematics describe physical reality, or does physical reality instantiate mathematical structures? Do rotational symmetries exist in nature because they're mathematically elegant, or do humans find them mathematically elegant because they appear in nature? These questions remain debated among philosophers and scientists. Perhaps the very distinction between mathematical structure and physical reality reflects limitations of human thought rather than a fundamental separation. Perhaps mathematics and physics describe the same underlying reality from different perspectives. The recognition that all scales involve rotation, from quantum spins to galaxy clusters, creates a sense of self-similar structure across the cosmos. Not identical patterns, not exact fractals, but a recurring theme of rotational motion appearing wherever matter and energy organize into stable structures. This recurrence suggests that rotation represents a fundamental mode of existence, a basic pattern into which the universe naturally falls. The alternative, a universe without rotation, seems difficult to imagine. It would require perfect symmetry in initial conditions, no angular momentum at any scale, all motion purely radial or linear. Such a configuration seems less natural, more special, than a universe permeated by rotation. The ubiquity of rotation implies that studying rotational phenomena provides insight into universal principles. Understanding how rotation arises, how it's conserved, how it influences structure formation, offers windows into the fundamental workings of nature. Every rotating object serves as an example of broader patterns, a particular instance of general principles. The rotation of Earth demonstrates planetary formation dynamics, atmospheric circulation patterns, and the coupling between solid and fluid layers. The rotation of galaxies reveals dark matter distribution and the history of structure formation. Each rotating system contains information about the processes that created it and the physical laws that govern it. Bringing these considerations together, a picture emerges of a cosmos characterized by rotation at every scale, where the perception of stillness arises from shared motion, where life evolved to internalize and anticipate rotational rhythms, and where the passage of time itself connects intimately to periodic rotational phenomena. The universe appears not as a static configuration, but as a dynamic system in constant rotation, with structures at each scale spinning relative to structures at other scales. Within this rotating cosmos, local reference frames create pockets of apparent rest, where complex processes, including life and consciousness, can unfold. The marvel is that this works, that stable structures and predictable relationships emerge from universal rotation. The regularity of planetary spin provides a reliable time base for biological evolution. The rotation of galaxies creates stable orbits where solar systems can persist for billions of years. The rotation of molecules enables the chemical transformations that power life. At each scale, rotation contributes to the stability and functionality that make complex organization possible. Rather than pure chaos, the universe exhibits ordered rotation that creates reliable patterns. This ordered rotation allows prediction, enables life to anticipate future states based on past patterns. The regularity of cosmic rotations makes the universe comprehensible, creates rhythms that organisms can internalize, provides steady cycles against which to measure change. Without these rotational periodicities, the cosmos would present less structure, fewer reliable patterns to exploit. The predictable return of day and night, of seasons, of tides, all stem from rotational and orbital motions that life has learned to anticipate. This predictability forms part of what makes life possible. Yet, within the ordered structure, variation and complexity arise. No two planetary rotations exactly match. Orbital perturbations create subtle changes in patterns. Tidal interactions gradually modify rotation rates over geological time. At each scale, rotational motion exhibits both pattern and variation, creating a cosmos that's neither rigidly deterministic nor completely random. This balance between order and change, between predictable cycles and novel variation, characterizes the universe humans inhabit. The contemplation of cosmic rotation culminates in a sense of participating in vast processes that extend far beyond individual awareness. The rotation you share with Earth, solar system, galaxy, all connects you to patterns that originated in the quantum fluctuations of the early universe and will persist far into the future. Long after individual lives end, Earth will continue spinning, planets will orbit the sun, the solar system will circle the galaxy. The rotation you briefly participate in transcends your personal existence, linking you to cosmic rhythms that dwarf human timescales. This perspective can feel either humbling or elevating, depending on interpretation. Humbling because it reveals human insignificance relative to cosmic scales, the tiny and temporary nature of individual existence against the vastness of universal rotation. Elevating because it demonstrates participation in something immense and ancient, connection to processes that built the structures allowing life to emerge. Both responses carry truth. Humans are simultaneously insignificant in cosmic terms and remarkable as organized systems capable of understanding the cosmos that created them. The ability to reflect on rotation, to understand motion you can't feel, represents a distinctive form of awareness. Through thought and investigation, humans transcend immediate perception, grasping realities that sense alone can't reveal. This capacity for abstract understanding distinguishes human consciousness, enabling recognition of participation in cosmic patterns. You stand on a spinning planet, moving through space at tremendous velocities, yet feel at rest because you share these motions. The recognition of this situation requires inference beyond direct experience, demonstrates the power of reason to reveal hidden aspects of reality. As Earth continues its endless rotation, as the solar system orbits through the galaxy, as distant galaxies turn in the cosmic void, the rotation you don't perceive shapes every aspect of existence. The day cycles, the seasons, the tides, all reflect rotational motions. The molecules that constitute your body incorporate rotational geometries. The biological rhythms that regulate your physiology echo planetary spin. The elements that compose your atoms formed in rotating stars. The initial conditions that gave rise to all structure trace back to the quantum fluctuations that seeded cosmic rotation. Standing still, you nonetheless participate in motion across scales, from molecular vibrations to galactic revolution. The stillness is local, relative, a special condition within frames of reference that themselves move through space-time. The silence of this motion, its imperceptibility to unaided perception, makes it no less fundamental to existence. The cosmos rotates continuously, a vast interconnected system of spinning structures nested within larger spinning structures, all the way up to the largest observable scales. This rotation shapes time, enables structure formation, and underlies the emergence of complexity, including life itself. The recognition invites a shift in perspective, an awareness that existence occurs within contexts of motion normally hidden from consciousness. The ground feels solid and still, but this solidity represents the shared motion of innumerable particles, and this stillness exists only relative to surfaces that themselves spin through space. The transformation isn't in external circumstances, but in understanding, in recognizing the dynamic nature of what appears static. The world doesn't change, but knowledge of it deepens, revealing layers of motion and structure previously unrecognized. This deeper understanding carries forward into daily experience, subtly coloring perception with awareness of hidden motion. Watching the sun arc across the sky becomes recognition of Earth's rotation rather than solar motion. Observing the changing seasons reflects awareness of Earth's tilted axis and orbital revolution. Experiencing the passage of time connects to knowledge of the planetary and cosmic motions by which time is marked and measured. The world becomes richer, more connected to cosmic contexts, even as immediate experience continues largely unchanged. The journey from unexamined perception to cosmic awareness doesn't require physical travel. It unfolds through thought, through learning, through the accumulated insights of generations of observers and thinkers who piece together the nature of cosmic rotation. Each person who grasps these concepts participates in a collective human understanding, a shared knowledge that transcends individual discovery. The rotation of the cosmos remains constant regardless of human awareness, but human consciousness transforms in recognizing it, gains access to a broader view of existence. In the end, the silent rotation of the cosmos provides context for existence, shapes the conditions that make life possible, and offers insight into the nature of reality. The paradox of motion that feels like stillness reveals the relational nature of experience, demonstrates how perception adapts to constant conditions. The connection between rotation at different scales illustrates the unity of physical principles across vast ranges of size and energy. The internalization of cosmic rhythms by living organisms shows how life emerges from and reflects the environment that shapes it. The ongoing exploration of rotational phenomena in extreme conditions pushes the boundaries of knowledge, reveals physics operating at limits that everyday experience can't approach. The universe continues its perpetual rotation, indifferent to human awareness or understanding. Planets spin, stars orbit galactic centers, molecules rotate, all participating in patterns established billions of years ago and destined to continue into the distant future. Within this rotating cosmos, on one particular planet orbiting an unremarkable star, life emerged and eventually produced beings capable of recognizing their place within the cosmic dance. This recognition doesn't change the dance, but transforms the dancers, creates consciousness of participation in something vast and ancient. When the rotation you don't feel nonetheless shapes who you are and the nature of your existence, connects you across scales to the deepest patterns of cosmic organization. Standing apparently still on solid ground, you nonetheless move through space as part of a spinning planet in a rotating galaxy within a universe characterized by motion at every scale, all of it imperceptible to direct sensation, yet fundamental to everything you experience and are.